So, ever since the end of World War One, when gasoline was formulated by Rockefeller to retrofit Ford vehicles, after World War One, the Seven Sisters divided and conquered the Middle East to maintain this hegemony over the world when it came to controlling the flow of gasoline throughout the world. And so, after the conclusion of World War One, the Seven Sisters divided genocidally warmongered and propped up division, divide and conquer policies within the Middle East. They propped up both sides of the conflict to keep these regions genocidally warmongered and to keep them subverted. So after World War II, when Rockefeller dealt with the House of Saud to peg the Middle East oil and the rest of OPEC members to the petrodollar, that is the system we currently have today because Rockefeller negotiated with the House of Saud after the conclusion of World War II to sell not only Saudi Arabia, Saudi Arabian oil, but also you gotta understand that after World War II, by America controlling the flow of energy throughout the world, America industrialized and rebuilt Europe. So now the current policies in Europe is the European Union. And so through the European Union and the Pentagon, by flowing and controlling the energy reserves of the world, they're able to prop up their economies, they're able to prop up their militaries. And all of that is controlled to controlling the flow of energy throughout the world. So the European Union, along with the Federal Reserve, they control the world order, financial order. That that's how the system of hegemony is derived. So now the world is monopolized by these gasoline vehicles that all nations are enslaved to have their transportation industries all dependent on gasoline and diesel vehicles. And so to this day, America uses the world reserve currency as a weapon, economical weapon. We inflict our military, whether it be the alliance of the Pentagon with NATO, to subvert third world nations into perpetual congealing and taming foreign nations to do the will and the bidding of this Western alliance. We warmongered Europe around World War II. We dropped bombs in Japan. We divided and conquered China. We divided and conquered North Korea. And then after World War II, the Western Alliance turned Asia into a sweatshop for the never-ending greed of consumptionary goods of Asian exports being imported into the Western countries. To this day, America considers Asia as their sphere of influence. Africa has been perpetually kept poor. Africa has been kept starved from economics due to America and the Eurozone considering the African currencies inferior currencies. And so they keep their devaluated currencies impoverished with perpetual enslavement of all of the African continents. The same they do to South America. Between America's foreign affairs and manifest destiny on South America, they treat South America like it's to do the bidding of the Atlantic Fruit Company. And they derogatory these nations as banana republics as they thumb their nose of waspy economics and they thumb their nose at the South American continents with manifest destiny to keep them poor and impoverished and to stop them from uniting themselves into a South American Union, because they fear that if South America becomes a union, that poses a threat in the spheres of the Americas. The same for the Middle East. These European armies, warmongers, genocidically the Arab lands to keep them submissive to the petrodollar. So at the end of the day, that is what's going on with this world order. The truth hurts, then let it hurt. At the end of the day, after World War II, Europe was dependent from the ruins of the conclusions of World War II. Europe was dependent on America as in that time, America emerged as the world sole superpower because of the power of maintaining a nuclear arsenal that Harry Truman bombarded twice on Japan. So Europe had to follow the whims of American foreign affairs after World War II came to a conclusion. And then once Western Europe started rising up and aligning themselves after the ruins of the rubbles of the conclusion of World War II, Europe started developing themselves into a union. But the Eurozone was always controlled through the stock exchange of the New York Stock Exchange, through the Federal Reserve and the Treasury Department. But the thing that makes Europe unique, it is the platform of all these organizations of economics. The International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, the Bank of Settlements, the SWIFT system, the World Trade Organization, all these headquartered organizations that control and supports the greenback, because through supporting the petrodollar, the Western order can prop up their militaries and their commerce and their currencies. And through these alliances between Western powers, the rest of the world is stuck in perpetual submissiveness and subvergence to cave in to the whims of America and Europe's foreign affairs. And so what I find atrocious about this monopoly of gluttony is that by keeping the world shackled and enslaved to the gasoline pumps, we are destroying this planet. We are committing unreversible destruction on this planet. Trillions and trillions and trillions of tons ever since the gasoline cars were cranked out of the factories. It's been 100 and some odd years of gasoline polluting this planet. And these effects are the greenhouse effects and thermal erratic, uncontrollable formations of the greenhouse effect is creating this planet in a destructive fashion to unravel. This effects on the planet and the effect that it has on the planet cycle of seasons and weather formations and uncontrollable erratic storm and the melting of the Arctic, all these effects are unreversible for millenniums to come, because all these gases that have been emitted by tailpipe gasoline guzzlers throughout the world, these gases will be stuck in the 5 layers of our hemispheres for thousands of years to come. So these effects are unreversible. And for America to enslave and keep enslaved to this day the rest of the world to gasoline guzzlers, America has committed the number one sin that cannot be forgiven when it comes to this planet and the American greenback well-reserved petrodollar that perpetually, with gluttony of greed, they keep the world shackled and enslaved to the submission and the brutality of being forced to adhere to America's foreign affairs when it comes to America's policies of their militaries and NATO's military, subverting the world and keeping the world oppressed and shackled and enslaved to gasoline pumps, and enslaving the world transportation systems to the whims of the petrodollar. And so that's why I'm coming out with my own theory of the wealth of nations and the theory of morality that is beyond Adam Smith's theories. I have, as an economical philosopher, come up with my theories to better advance all nations from poverty, to break the shackles of enslavement of, of gluttony that America has committed to this very day by enslaving the world and shackling all nations to gasoline pumps with this world reserve monopoly of petrodollars between Europe, the European Union, and the American Federal Reserve, along with Washington, Capitol Hill, and the bureaucracy of the European leaders. They're falling asleep at the wheel, not realizing that this planet is inching every so closer to destructiveness, that we will not be able to reverse the effects of these tonnages of carbon emissions that will be permanently in the 5 layers of our atmospheres of this planet, and the effects will be felt for millenniums to come. That's why I don't forgive the system of gluttony to the American greed of petroleum, petrodollar enslavement of the world. And along with all the genocidal wars to control this world order, this monopoly of the Western economic order, entire nations and entire continents have been kept impoverished. Hunger and famine has reigned throughout the world of the third world. This type of currencies between the American greenback or the American currency and the Eurozone currency are using petrol energy to enslave the dependency and to prop up their armies with windfall profits. They flunky around the House of Saud. They subvert the other OPEC members to be submissive, impoverished, and sanctioned. OPEC plus one, they are intentionally crippled by NATO in America and America's foreign affairs along with Europe. And through their military might of NATO and the Pentagon, they subvert the whole regions of the world just to maintain their monopolies of hegemonies and control the Western world order, while the rest of the world and the planet has to suffer. These are unjust systems of governance. This is economical enslavement. It's not only impoverishing 75% of the world's continents, but 75% of the world's population. America should be ashamed of this economical weapon that we call the petrodollar. And this Western alliance of economical hegemony has to come to an end. There has to be a better distribution of nations, governance, and a better distribution of the wealth of nations. And let the theory of morality be in good faith as the third world rises up from poverty, when all nations, currencies, has equal purchasing power, where no one nation can devaluate another nation and demean their currencies to perpetually keep their nations impoverished, like America has committed, along with the European Union, controlling this financial order of the world, while they feast themselves into a first world order, and they oppress the second world, but worst of all, they enslave the third world. This type of economics doesn't make sense when it comes to morality. It should not be grounded with the theory of the wealth of nations, let alone the division of labors, of all commerce in all sectors of all mankind. Let freedom ring, sing a song, sing a freedom of songs. Let us our shackles be broken from enslavement to destroying this world and keeping humanity enslaved perpetually to the gasoline and the diesel pumps. Let us be liberated in the third world from perpetual poverty and enslavement when they devaluate and use their hegemony currencies to inferiorly devaluate third world nations into perpetual poverty and enslavement and dependency on the whims of this hegemony superpower. There comes a time in world order when there has to be a revolution on behalf of mankind. 75% of the world population suffers under the yoke of their currencies being devaluated by America petrodollar and by the Eurozone currency. They are kept inferiorly submissive and oppressed by this hegemony of Western and American economical theories. And that is the whole of 75% of the land mass of the world and 75% of the world's population cannot be demeaned and enslaved by America's petrodollar and the Eurozone currency propping up the greenback, and NATO and the Pentagon together allying themselves to divide and conquer the whole world. These type of unjust systems deserves to be re-ratified into a dramatic new formations that represents equally all regions and all peoples. That's why I'm calling for a new world order when it comes to the wealth of nations and the theory of morality that all humans are created equal with unalienable rights when we are tender of currencies in good faith. That's why I am calling for all nations' currencies to have the same purchasing power and never be devaluated one from another. We are all created equal as humans. We shall all have the opportunity to prosper. We shall all have the opportunity to raise our regions, our families, our countries off from poverty. These are the theories of economics that I have been the architect of, the theologian, the philosopher of. I am calling for a world revolution and divergence into a new, better distributed wealth of nations. The divisions of labors that are pegged on the right that all nations are created equal, and that all nations have the right to rise up and free themselves from oppression, militarily oppression, foreign political oppression, currency enslavement oppressions. So all nations, in my theory, and the new world economical order that I am trying to implement, all nations will have the same opportunity to rise up from poverty because their currencies of all the nations in this world will have the same equal purchasing power. And not one nation or not one organization can keep a nation enslaved and impoverished by demeaning their currencies as inferior currencies. So I am calling for an economical revolution to liberate all nations and for all wealth of nations to be respected as all human beings are equal with unalienable rights.